Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name is John Viemeyer. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate, and I am a federal co-lead on the Risk Management and Hazard Mitigation team. Welcome to the Risk and Hazards team October meeting. Here today, we're going to focus on the statewide environmental threat assessment update. Quick rundown on the agenda is we'll do a presentation followed by some Q&A, and then at the end we'll have a few notes on some upcoming events that the Risk and Hazard team is hosting. Before we dive in, just want to provide a little bit of background on what IARPC is. So IARPC is the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. And what it does is it brings together 18 U.S. agencies, departments, and offices across the federal government with a focus on research in the Arctic. It's charged with enhancing both the scientific monitoring of and research on local, regional, and global environmental issues in the Arctic. And it serves as a mechanism for greater interagency collaboration and coordination. To guide this collaboration and coordination, IARPC has created and implemented a 5-year Arctic research plan. The most recent plan runs from 2022 to 2026, and it presents a research framework with a number of thematic goals. Within those, there are 4 priority areas and 5 foundational areas. Our group, the Risk Management and Hazard Mitigation team, is one of those priority areas. And within that team, we have set out a number of goals that we're hoping to work with the interagency on in our implementation plan that began in 2022 and has recently been updated in 2024. One of those key goals or key objectives was an update to the statewide threat assessment. So our team has been working with the Denali Commission, amongst others, on what this kind of update would look like. And today we've invited the Denali Commission, Ms. Liza Mack, to come in and provide an update on that. It'll be a short to medium-sized update. There'll be a lot of room for conversation. We are very interested in hearing people's thoughts on this, both good or bad. So please feel free to chime in. As Meredith said, put those in the chat or raise your hand. If you want to be anonymous, you can feel free to send them to Meredith or myself. We will scrub your name and ask the question. If that's will help get your point across, we're happy to do that. So again, thank you for joining us today, and I will turn it over to Liza for our presentation.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Meredith. Ang everybody. Aluk tatua stakta cooking, agdago ilan akakta cooking, engujum ilan akakta cook. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Liza Mack. I am a program manager here at the Denali Commission. I manage the Village Infrastructure Protection Program here. The VIP program was actually created to assist rural Alaskan communities that were threatened by erosion, floods, and permafrost thaw. And the goal of our program is to actually mitigate the impact of these threats, which is actually kind of the premise of what the statewide threat assessment is. And so today I'm kind of going to go through like a brief background 30,000-foot look at what the previous statewide threat assessment was and kind of what the plans are going forward. And so I'm just going to share my screen here. I have a short slideshow. And then once I turn on the slideshow, I can't see anything. And so just FYI. Okay. So as many of you know, the statewide threat assessment was published in 2019, and it was prepared by the University of Alaska Fairbanks and the Army Corps of Engineers and the Cold Region Research Engineer Laboratory. And we worked in conjunction with all of these. And this, the statewide threat assessment was started to assess the threats of infrastructure from erosion, flooding, thawing, permafrost, and combined threats. So within the statewide threat assessment itself, it was the communities were scored and then they were ranked and grouped according to their relative threat level. So 1 was high, 2 was medium, 3 was low. So out of the original communities, there was 211 communities that were looked at, and they didn't actually include the larger urban communities. The teams actually determined after the list that there were actually 24 of these 211 that were uninhabited, and or that they were subsistence camps and they didn't have permanent population, no public infrastructure. Public infrastructure is actually what the state threat assessment was looking at, and the public infrastructure was defined, but not limited to schools, clinics, government buildings, sanitary sewer systems, freshwater sources, airstrips, fuel tanks, and primary roads. Even though the study was focused on this primary infrastructure, public infrastructure, it was also recognized that that housing was also threatened. There was threats to the environment, and also that there were culturally significant locations that were of concerns to communities. After these were originally looked at, there were 78 communities that were in group 1, which was considered most threatened, and 144 communities for groups 1 and 2 for all 3 of the threats. So the 2019 statewide threat assessment, it was actually gave us a really good understanding of what all of these environmental threats to Alaskan communities were. So there was a lot of reports that kind of went into, not kind of, they did. There were a lot of reports and information that went into the statewide threat assessment. And here you could see just the historical background of some of the reports that went into it. So the early reports from the GAO, 2003, this report itself looked at the impacts of these hazards. And then there was the formulation of the Intermediate Action Working Group. And this was actually one of the bigger steps into creating the methodology to assess and prioritize some of the risks that we were looking at. So the Army Corps was looking at the flooding and erosion. The UAF CREL looked at the thawing permafrost and the integration of both the combined threats from erosion. The 2009 baseline erosion assessment provided the framework for evaluating erosion, and this was later expanded to include permafrost and flooding. So these are some of the studies that were looked at in data collection and modeling, and this was the way that we came to build onto the 2019 statewide threat assessment and the comprehensiveness of it. So the data that was used to rank these communities was based on information that was publicly available, and also data that was publicly available and data that was given by volunteered by public agencies and also by the private sector. So these rankings were split into 3 different groups. I'll talk about each of those groups here more in depth in a little bit. But one thing that the team wanted to note is that it's recognized that the information that was gathered and the information that was put into this report, that the reliability of the data varies among the communities. There were places where they had more information. There were places that had less, just had less contact and less information that had been out there. As we've been since 2019, and actually just over the past 10 or so years, we've really seen an influx in the amount of information that's out there, as far as social media, as far as being able to have communities that are more connected and being able to share the information from their communities. So the statewide threat assessment looked at threats to public infrastructure. And as we know, we've seen how climate change actually affects us here in Alaska faster than anywhere else. And we're also seeing how these affect our homes, our buildings, our culture, and our communities. And these here are some estimates of how big this actually issue is. It is estimated that it's about $5.5 billion of infrastructure damage by the end of the century. And then UAA and ICER estimated this between $550 and $100 million per year. and ANTHC estimated that this would be over 32 million over 5 years, and also about 3.45 billion to protect just the infrastructure. So the statewide threat assessment identified 144 Native communities that were highly threatened, which is in group 1, and moderately threatened in group 2. And so we're looking at infrastructure damage from erosion, flooding, permafrost thaw. And then, as I mentioned, the things that we're looking at are including schools, clinics, government buildings, sewer systems, freshwater sources, airstrips, and fuel tanks. And the way that they looked at these different groups and these different issues was erosion, flooding, and permafrost thaw. So I'm going to talk about the definitions of these just so that we are all on the same page, and just so that everybody understands what was looked at in the previous assessment, because we need to have these definitions in order for everybody to just kind of have the same understanding of where we are. So erosion is the removal of soil, either thawed or frozen due to the movement of water. And it's looked at in 2 different broad categories, both coastal erosion, which is from ocean currents, wave action, or storm surges. And then also riparian erosion, so river currents, which responds to the changes in the flow and sediment. In the flooding category, there were 29 communities that were considered group 1 and 86 in group 2. So it's also looking at how the sediment is transported and how much material is moved to where by these different factors. Like I said, the ocean currents, wave action, storm surges, and also in the river, just the river currents and how the river is flowing. So flooding was the second group, and flooding is the inundation of infrastructure or impassability of airstrips or roads due to elevated water levels along coasts or rivers. It talks about the risks the viability of the communities when it threatens the access to critical infrastructure, those things that we mentioned before. We do see two different kinds of flooding. There is coastal flooding, which includes high tides, storm surges, waves from storm surges and that's the most common. So the abnormal rise in water generated by a storm above the highest tide. And then river flooding, the elevated water because of ice jams, large rain events, slow rain events that continue over time, quick melting snowpack. And then again, the excess water goes to where the infrastructure is located and threatens the community. And then we have permafrost thaw. So this is the soil or rock that remains at or below 0 degrees for 2 or more years is the definition of permafrost. And as we've seen, when there's a thermal imbalance and the soil is altered, that permafrost begins to thaw, and the heat can be transferred either through construction on infrastructure or through existing infrastructure. Usually, in order to build things, there is geotech that informs where to build things on roadways. It's recognized that permafrost has been something that people have known about for obviously many years, but also in just building the infrastructure in rural places for many years, that it is something that has been considered. So along with just the infrastructure, there's also climate change. We see snow drifts, reflected sun, and also just the increase in surface temperature also affects permafrost thaw. So it's estimated that the environmentally threatened communities face about $4.3 billion in cost to infrastructure from these environmental threats. Most environmentally threatened communities do not have access to baseline risk assessments to quantify the magnitude or severity of the threats, meaning that they don't actually have they don't actually have they don't have the information that they need in order to look at what it is right now, so that if something was ruined because of environmental threats, what they were going to have to do to how much it was going to cost. So this brings us to a couple of the unmet needs. So the unmet needs equals what we were just talking about, that total need minus what the existing support is. So in order to figure out what the existing or what the unmet needs are, there was a community mitigation assumption. So there were 144 communities with infrastructure threats. And then the subject matter experts looked at the community and what they had there and what the regional makeup was it, and then the judgment of the most likely mitigation approach and scope. And so the mitigation approaches and scopes, there's three main ones. There's protect in place, manage retreat, and relocation. If you can see here that there are some questions that were asked and considered when you talked about whether or not a community should protect in place, whether or not they should be looking at managed retreat. Protect in place would be when you are building up infrastructure that is that protects where you are. So this could be a breakwater, this could be replacing some of the infrastructure that protects where you are. Also identifying some of the structural things that need to be protected. And then there is managed retreat. So is there a safe place where the community can go? And we have seen all of these approaches throughout Alaska. For example, when you have a home or a piece of infrastructure that is being threatened by a river, and if you have the ability to move that to a safer location, we have seen that being done. And then also there is full relocation, and we see this, for example, with the village of Newtok moving to their new site of Muktivik, and that actually they just actually have temporary homes that should have been delivered there this past weekend. So these are all parts of what went into the cost estimating of how much some of these things would cost. So the baseline estimate from Newtok, the relocation experience there, was scaled based on the regional and population factors. And then also the managed retreat algorithm. So modifying baseline relocation estimate and multiplied by % of community impacted. So there are maps that are used to see and predict where erosion and or permafrost thaw and or flooding might occur, and then moving the public infrastructure away from those places was taken into this algorithm and how much it would cost. And then also the protect in place. And so cost estimates for the different protect in place options. This, with these things considered, the total need again is $3.4 billion, 90 to $100 million a year over the next 10 years. And you do see these numbers increasing. And part of the reason that you see it happening so much over the next 10 years is because of the accelerated climate change that we're seeing here in Alaska. With the vulnerability assessments, we have 119 communities that need one or more site-specific assessment, and we foresee them needing about $32 million required for these assessments. And some of the assumptions are that threats can be addressed as mitigation, and professional judgments don't represent the community decision-making. So there are, a lot of the information that went into, for example, the statewide threat assessment isn't necessarily, isn't always representative of what the community needs are. Sometimes even though your community might be at the lower end of, say, the list of on the statewide threat assessment, they can see that their infrastructure is being threatened, and they do need help. And then also the cost is in $2020. So when we look at this across different regions, you see a significant difference and a significant amount of need based on where you are. And this, of course, has to do with river systems, loss of permafrost, flooding and erosion, and how it's accelerated in different places. Some of the existing support that we have is about 13 million is awarded to environmentally threatened communities, or was awarded in 2019. This has increased. We have seen with the change in administration since 2020 that we have actually gotten a whole lot of support. IIJA monies and so on have been very good for actually building up and assisting some of these needs. But the unmet need is still about $80 million annually over the next 10 years. So bringing this all back to the statewide threat assessment process, the statewide threat assessment process actually evaluated 9 key factors across 183 communities, and the factors included critical infrastructure, human health and safety, subsistence, shoreline use, community setting, the number of people affected, housing availability, environmental hazards, cultural importance, and non-commercial and residential surfaces. And so this, it's a comprehensive approach. I think it ensured that there was a holistic understanding of the risks and the vulnerabilities that were faced by each community. And going forward, we would like to see this framework continue to be part of the next statewide threat assessment. And so the next steps is here at the commission, we are partnering with USGS and the Army Corps of Engineer, and the project will be put out to bid. We will be incorporating the new data and information that has become available since 2019. And I think that has definitely increased the amount of data that can be incorporated into the conversation. And that's all I have. I do have, there's time for questions. And also we have Sally Russell Cox online here too. And she was part of the team for the first iteration of the statewide threat assessment. And we're happy to answer questions, but no hard ones. I don't know what John was talking about. Thank you, everybody. Kagasakun.
I see Ryan is raising his hand. I'm also gonna put a link in the chat to a form that we have for gathering public input on the update to the statewide threat assessment. And I'll put it in the chat a couple of times, but here's the first one.
Thank you.
Yep. And yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you. I would like to start with something just real soft here and say thank you for both the presentation and the work that you're doing to update that environmentally threatened communities report. It has been really interesting to be able to reference that and then see as our world continues to change around us, how climate is impacting our communities and how we can work together to coordinate research and the different lines of effort that are going on throughout the state. I'm curious, as you're looking at this next round, what are some things that you learned from the last time writing the report that you'll be integrating into this update? Anything you could change, if you could wave a magic wand, what are you looking forward to? Thank you.
I would say just the increase in information and actually people having the ability to really describe what's happening in their own local communities prior to now. I mean, with with Starlink and fiber and everybody being more connected, I think that you see real time the effects of climate change happening in our communities. And I think that that's going to provide a richness to the next statewide threat assessment.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for your question. Liza, great job illustrating the process and what we're looking at here. And I think another learning is that we would like, more from the scientific community as far as input and comments, both on the applied science side, but also the policy side, knowing that they need to work in concert to get, the best results and have the best document here. And like Liza said, we've had more monitoring over the past, more information, more inputs, but now is the time, for this month, we'd like to hone in on our scope that we hand off to the Corps. And so everyone on this call is, we sincerely thank you for any time and effort put into this. We also appreciate USGS's stepping up to the table to want to partner on this. It's a perfect opportunity to, partnerships mean, or they kind of vet each other, where we understand that there's a need for this report. There have been many agencies that have referenced it in the past, and so we need to update it with current information. And the last report, the final conclusion ultimately was that more data collection was needed. Now, this update may convey a similar sentiment, but we're hoping to be able to incorporate some of that information that has been collected over the last 5 years. So thanks for letting me chime in.
No, thank you, everybody. This is Jocelyn Fenton. She's our acting federal co-chair, and she's been at the Denali Commission for 7 years, quite a few.
6 years, yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, so kind of helped get it across the finish line last time with Dawn Antrobus, who was instrumental in getting this complete. So thanks, everyone. We can go to other questions.
Thank you. Julie?
Yes, thanks for that great report. 2 quick questions. One, the National Science Foundation Navigating the New Arctic has a lot of different groups collecting data, and it might be really great to gather the information coming from those groups. I mean, I just got back from redoing coastal profiles in a number of places from 2003, and then doing it again just this last week. And so there's a lot of information there that we could share. So just how do we do that? Who's the best contact to send information where it can get used? And my second question was, I just downloaded this letter. It's a letter from Inamaqua out to their village recipients looking for a person to apply to a relocation, managed retreat, or protect in place coordinator. And so it's a full-time job in that community. Is that something that's coming from the Denali Commission? I'm just wondering how they're funding that and how other villages might be doing, how many other villages might be having a similar positions.
Oh, thank you. I'm not familiar with Inamaqua. And so I don't think that's something that we're funding, but that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's most likely through the BIA's Tribal Resilience TRCP or TCRP, Tribal Community Resilience Program.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Nunamiqua. And
Okay.
we
Thank you, Corey.
We've funded some community relocation coordinators, and it's really, the idea is great. Communities need basically a project manager in order to manage these environmental threats. The state of Alaska, through Sally Russell Cox's program, funded these positions. Denali Commission has funded these types of positions, and BIA ECRP program has taken over for that. So I would reach out to them unless they're on the line. And these are just some great positions because everyone wears so many different hats in a community. It's hard to add yet another responsibility, yet, other grants to do protect in place, relocation, or a managed retreat. So cheers to BIA for picking up those roles. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then back to your first question about the NNACO, we actually have been working closely with their permafrost, with some of their scientists that are doing the permafrost work and stuff. So we are familiar that some of this is happening. So it's exciting that we'll be able to kind of hopefully bridge and make some of those connections.
Yeah, it's a long time between your reports, so we can provide much more up-to-date information. So yeah, let's be in touch.
Fantastic. Yeah, please. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Liza. A couple comments on the first question. I was trying to get in on that one, was a little late. Sort of what might be different or what's new since 2018. I think one thing we've struggled with a lot in our discussions in PA4 is there were sort of 3 risks/hazards addressed in 2018, and we can come up with a top 10 list. I mean, you can now add glacial outburst floods to the Juneau area, right? So I think balancing, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of potential hazards and risks, but just the bandwidth, the time, the funding, especially for something at the statewide level, it is just going to be a tricky dance, right? Because there's lots of great projects and data out there from different areas, but how do you scale something from, let's say, the Seward Peninsula to something in Fort Yukon to something in Ketchikan, right? So we're sort of really working on that a lot. And then another question that's come up a lot, but is even harder to address, would be compounding disturbances. So think about a wildfire and then an earthquake or something like that. You can get a little wacky with those, but can we get to that second level where maybe a community that's already being stressed by one thing, something else happens? And again, that can get complicated fast and with limited resources and whatnot. I think they're neat directions to go in, but really hard to nail that one down. Thank you.
No, thank you. Absolutely. Anne?
Hi, I'm working up in the North Slope Borough where I still am doing monitoring with community-based monitors. And to Julia's point, most of my coastal profile data, since we've been taking them since 2015 with monitors, I connected with the Alaska Coastal Hazards Division at the state. Are you familiar with them? And they have a listing of different communities where they have coastal profiling, and they try and keep it updated. Their staff is limited, but we have a page there, and I would recommend everybody to try and find some more funding somehow for their staff to update, because our page is from 2017 to 2020, and we've been taking profiling every year, 5 months on 6 transects up here in Utqiagvik. And so it's way behind being posted as a public repository for people to use. So I don't know how we can coordinate that, but that would be a central place we could be putting all this, because they've already started that.
Great. And then I think I just see Sally just put a link in the chat, or she just put the name of the where it's located. No, thank
Yeah.
you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah, we're looking forward to the process and happy for our partners. Sally, is there anything that you wanted to mention?
No, I think you did a great job, Liza.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I have there's some comments and questions in the chat that I can get addressed now. And also just a note for people, we have this meeting for the next until 11:30 Alaska time. Just recognizing that there might be a lot of discussion, but also that we might not need all of that time. So we're just kind of going to see what happens with the flow of the discussion. So I will start addressing some of the comments in the chat, if that's okay. Ryan Witten said to Julie and others, have you come across efforts to create a directory, repository, or list of other various research data streams and connections that are available and could help coordinate communities' climate resilience efforts? This seems like it would be a great fit for a platform dashboard sort of effort. And then Anna also responded to that with some information regarding how that's connected to the permafrost discovery gateway. So maybe Anna or others could respond to this question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meredith, and thanks for the question, Ryan. I'd love to talk to you. So Permafrost Discovery Gateway is one resource in development, and it's focusing on the big geospatial data portion. So map products that are too big for most of us to work with, where you need big HPC, high performance computing resources. So and we're also working towards near real time automated monitoring of permafrost thaw. So looking at different features, since we can't see permafrost directly, we'll have to look at lakes draining or new ponds forming and thaw slumps forming and so on. And then we have several more tools. We have a webinar series here in the PA4 ARPIC group, and that webinar series focus on available tools to access various kind of data to help people make assessments and informed decisions. So on October 17, we have Q Greenland. So it's a region focus where on Greenland, where Elise Thurber will present on that and its geospatial data portal for Greenland specific data. And then Leslie Jones will present on November 14 on an Alaska open data portal. And then last spring, we had Chris Mayo present on the Alaska Coastal Cooperative, which Julie mentioned in the chat too. And we also had presentation by the IARC-led Arctic EDS, Engineering Data and Design Support System. So there's several tools actively being developed to help gather data and help enable easy access to it. And I think they all have a little different focus, whether it's the region or the type of data. So it's wonderful to see that growing.
Yeah, thank you. And I always love hearing about these efforts to pull data and information together. I think that it's a really important step for us to take. We're doing all sorts of great research, and so where are we storing this information? How are we helping to surface it and support others to be able to access it? And I think that having it available in a digital or connected form is also really important, because I think it can help to support what I see as a potential follow-on step, which is once you have data and the data becomes available and the data can be updated, and you have logic around predicting resilience or risk factors, then you can start to do some automation around, well, here's what we're checking for, here's what we're seeing, and here's how we know if we need to make a decision or change things. And that can be automated to help support communities, at some point in the future, as this potential thing could be more refined. And so I think it could be a nice step to supporting capacity and resilience in our rural communities. But it kind of takes this combination effort of the research and the mitigation planning and the work to build the reports and things like the Denali Commission is doing. So thank you.
Melissa? Sorry, I didn't know if I'm supposed to be calling on people still or not.
That's fine. I'll just speak out. Hi, everyone. Melissa Shapiro with the Permafrost Pathways Initiative. I've had a chance to speak with quite a few of you about this report, which we just think is really a tremendous tool for communicating the risk that we're seeing in Alaska that is not necessarily always a priority of our decision makers, especially in DC. And I think to that end, I wanted to just ask whether there was sort of a opportunity to do a bit of an analysis in light of some of the funding gaps that were identified in the unmet needs report as to how, if at all, the 2019 statewide threat assessment has been effectively, again or not, informing the direction of some grant awards or federal funding support to those communities. So has that ranking system, I see there's a question in the form about whether or not this report has served communities. And I do sort of wonder if you all have found that whether that ranking system has helped to inform direct funding to group 1, group 2 communities, or whether or not there really is not a effective correlation there or a clear correlation there. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. We actually have been working with the team at UAF who have done a retrospective analysis of this 2019 statewide threat assessment and what that was meant to do was exactly that, kind of inform the process and also look at the effectiveness of the document itself. And we are expecting those results in the next couple of weeks, actually. And so I think that maybe one of the next things we could do is work with them to kind of look at to have them kind of present what their research is. And I do know that they have looked at that. And yeah, so that's forthcoming, definitely.
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of the answer, Melissa. I'm from
Hi, Erin.
meeting it. Yeah, sorry, I was a little bit late to the meeting this morning. So it does affect the data collection at the community level. So we did see a relationship, and I've got some nice figures on that actually. So that's one way to look at it. We did pull down the new state funding. I'm happy to make that information available to people. And the answer is no, not quite. And so Liza and I talked a little bit about this though, and I think obviously funding is more complicated though. And two of the main communities in the statewide threat assessment that are receiving most of the funding right now are Nome and Bethel. And so the port development in Nome highly skews things quite a bit if you just look at the overall numbers. So I'm if you want to know more about that and you'd like to dig into it with us though, I'm happy to share. We've pulled out all the data and we've done some preliminary analysis, and so now we have to look at it again. So yeah.
Okay, I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Anne?
I just wanted to go back to the comment about a project coordinator for the options of what to do to move away from the coast, the relocator, protect in place, or managed retreat. Where do I go? Because I'm up in the North Slope Borough, of course, and I do a risk assessment workshop every year that I'm here, and I just finished several, and I hear the same concerns from my folks. I'm not supposed to be talking about it, but this is under IRB. But the effort is to find out what their risk perceptions are and interpretations of all hazards, not just what we're talking about here. And the one that stands out, of course, is what I just said, is how do we move? What is the process to get out of the harm's way? And it's really complicated up here because of land jurisdiction. Who do I go to ask? I mean, does ICAS up here have somebody like that on board if it's a BIA related funded position? Does anybody know? I need to find somebody because I work with the emergency management office and they have no idea either. Lisa, are you on?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I'm not familiar exactly with ICAS, but somebody you might be able to talk to about that would be maybe Jennifer Robinette with BIA, because she runs our tribal climate resilience program, and she might know better if there's a tribal climate resilience person in your region.
In our region, well, we have a lot of non-tribal people that are in harm's way too. So,
well, I mean, like somebody who's working on those efforts that might be able to talk to you about what some of those options and what some of those risks look like, and what some of the, what they might be able to help with.
Okay, I see somebody send something to me. I'll look at the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jocelyn?
Okay. Also, so the Center for Environmentally Threatened Communities, I think would be, they're a technical arm of the Denali Commission, and they should be able to assist on laying out the stepwise approach. We want it to be a better process that is more transparent and straightforward, but unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. But generally speaking, it's, sorry, someone's at the door. Trying to assess the risk, looking at your options, taking into account land ownership, and what needs to be done. But there's a general path forward that I think CETC can lay out for you, or we can help in addition offline. And then I'll put the BIA program in the chat. I did want to emphasize that the deadline is October 18, and it takes 24 hours to get an account on their application website. So have communities apply for, a fully funded position to help out with that. It's very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn. I don't see any other hands, but Meredith did put into the chat the form, just a public input form, and we will be circulating that more. And I think that something else that we will do is maybe do this webinar again, and maybe incorporate some of the information that people asked about and do it to a broader audience. With more community and tribal members fully present. So I think that those are some of the things that we'll be doing going forward. So thank you guys. I don't have anything else.
I just want to make sure before we close out that everyone who wrote comments or questions in the chat feels like they were responded to. I think that we got everything. Natalie, I did see you had your hand raised. Are you still here?
Hi, yeah, I am. Thanks. I was just gonna respond back to the question about whether or not the report made a difference in the funding. And it did in the projects that we looked at, in the sense that we understood that it was important to fund the project to resolve any known threats, or to plan for them moving forward. But in the sense of like the discussion that ensued, like, did it dictate, do we prioritize projects based on the data set? That's not how it worked. It was just a bit of information that helped us hopefully manage the project better so that the scope was more appropriate for the work that needed to be done. So someday, maybe.
Yeah, no, thank you.
But we're using it. The data is very helpful, and thanks for putting it together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jocelyn.
I'm trying to raise my hand to be polite. Maybe I missed it. I can't remember. And thank you, Natalie, for your comments. Liza, did you mention how in the last threat assessment, we gave 3 baseline protocols for risk collection or data collection in regards to flooding, erosion, and permafrost thaw. And we're hoping to improve those scopes of work in order to have that as a boilerplate. This is the data you need in order to make, for that decision-making process. Did you mention that at all?
I didn't mention that. Jocelyn, if you'd like to mention that.
I would certainly like to mention that we are hoping to have some example scopes of work, because we realized through the process, so after the statewide threat assessment in 2019 and these boilerplate templates, we recognize that there's more high-level management of risk assessments that need to be done. So then we're learning our lessons on each one and sharing that information with others. This was the proper, information that we gathered. This was helpful. This maybe wasn't so helpful, or it was not as easy to compare to other communities. And so we are working closely with ANTHC's climate group. It's not just the CETC. I need to familiarize myself with their larger entity's name. But Jackie Catalina Schaefer's group is, and with Jackie Overbeck, is trying to help us. Is Jackie on the line? Is Overbeck on the line? I thought I may have seen her. But we're trying to coordinate with them in order to have additional information that's supportive to that risk assessment and data collection work. So thanks.
Thank you.
May I sneak in a question?
Yes.
So, thank you. So I'm wondering, Liza and Jocelyn, how can, I wish the Denali Commission received a gazillion more funding than what you are receiving, because it's needed. And so how can the science community help educate people in DC about the value, the importance of funding to be allocated to Alaska communities, especially around permafrost thaw. So what is the, how can the science community, academic community help with that?
I think one of the ways right now would be really to share some of that very rich data that you guys have been collecting and have it be encompassed or, incorporated into this iteration of the statewide threat assessment. I think that what we've seen from the 2019 statewide threat assessment and all of these other things, when you look back at all the historical documents that build into it, is really that it has a lot of power. It has a lot of information, and it's in a very approachable document. It's not overly sciencey. You can actually read it. It's approachable. And I think that being able to take some of the hard data that you are collecting there and be able to share it and have it be part of the next iteration of things, I think would just help to illustrate all of the things that we're seeing and the way that things have been exacerbated between 2019 and now, and why it's so much more important to continue funding these scientific endeavors, funding these communities, funding for communities to be safe and to be healthy and resilient, I think are huge. And that's all something that we could contribute to this conversation.
And I just add, like Liza said, the value of these communities, but it also, and the value of the data and the historical info and all of the partnerships. And the Denali Commission brings that partnership leverage to the table. Unfortunately, we don't have a gazillion dollars of funding. And it's almost by design that we have to think smarter in order to get to where we need to be. But also we're saving money, we're saving public dollars and public infrastructure by mitigating issues prior to those emergencies. And so that's part of the messaging as well, is that as expensive as it seems like it is at the time right now, it will be less expensive dealing with the problem now than in the future.
Yeah, proactive, not reactive. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Judy?
Hi, everyone. I'm new to this group. This is my first time participating in one of these sessions, and I really appreciate the invitation. So I'm a senior fellow at the Arctic Institute. I do that in a voluntary capacity, and my extra free time. My full-time jobs that pay the bills. I work for the U.S. Coast Guard as an attorney and also as a judge advocate in the Army Reserves. But I work in DC, and my interest in this area is trying to draw upon the science and the community experience and translate that into action in DC. And I'm looking for ways to do that. And I've put in several proposals to speak at events next year. I just wrote a chapter for a book about New Talk as a case study of polycrisis. And I did, it won't be published for a while, but I hope to present on it next year. And so to the question of how do we share this? How do we make people aware? I found the Denali, the 2019 report very helpful in my research. I think it was approachable the way it was written. I found it very compelling to have the term USTEC, I don't know if I said that right, in the report. And I'm wondering if the update builds upon that concept, because I think that's a wonderful connection between the community experience of hardships, but also a sense of connection to the land. And I wonder if that term is still applicable. These are just things to think about, and if it's not in the report, I would suggest, I don't know all the different tribal languages. I never will. I can't even speak the languages of the countries I travel to just for conferences and such, other than where's the bathroom? Hello, thank you. Nice to meet you. Right, but I think finding words in the languages for our Alaskan Native villages and tribes is a way to connect what is happening to make it real. And this is something I tried to stress in what I just wrote, is that I'm talking about risk analysis and methodology to understand crises, but it's really a story about people going through some really difficult times. So that would be one suggestion, as anyone here is contributing in this space, to find ways to keep reminding ourselves that this is about people. And those of us who are not in those communities, but are trying to be an advocate for in education and outreach, that's something that we could maybe try and do more of. The other piece is connecting to current events. So my father is in a assisted living facility with dementia in Asheville, North Carolina, and has no power and no running water, and has people trying to take care of him, to give water, to flush toilets. And it's a temporary crisis. It's not a lasting one like some of our communities in Alaska, but it's getting a lot of attention on the news. And so what I am seeing in my research is what is happening to our communities in Alaska. And I say we because I don't share necessarily the historical cultural background, but I view everybody as part of the United States. And so they're my neighbors. And I think that's how you'd want to approach it with politicians and policymakers. These are neighbors. These are citizens. And I think they're a bellwether. And what is happening is in New Talk, that is happening in other communities around the Mississippi and in Florida and and now we're seeing it in the mountain areas of North Carolina, any place that's susceptible to flooding. So what the communities in Alaska are going through and talking about relocation, or forced relocation is a word I think is a stronger term, because that actually has like international legal implications. It's warning. So to the extent we can pull rapidly from some of these, when do the communities realize we have to move? And because now the communities outside of Asheville have to decide, like in Marshall, North Carolina, they're trying to decide, will they stay in that village or will they move? Will they rebuild or not? So if there's any opportunity for us to connect and take advantage of the attention in this space, that might be something else we could do. So I appreciate the chance to speak and listen, and I look forward to seeing the latest addition to the report.
No, Judy, thank you so much for those comments. And yeah, I think that definitely, as an Indigenous scholar, like, languages are definitely part of kind of what grounds us as Indigenous people. And I think that some of the meanings of the words lose it outside, and it builds your worldview. And so I think that I appreciate you making that connection and yeah, identifying that. Thank you. I think that would be, yeah, Noted and agreed. Anybody? Okay, turn it back over to you, John.
Yeah, and actually, I'll turn it over to Anna. I know you mentioned the
Okay.
couple updates or the couple of upcoming events in passing, but maybe if we want to just repeat those here for a couple of meetings that we have coming up. And then Meredith, correct me if I'm wrong, but information on these will also be available on the IARPIC website for folks to find and register for, sign up for, and join. So, Anna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. Yes, so we have two upcoming webinars. So half of that hour will be devoted to a presentation and the other half open discussion. And they are focusing on the tools of accessing, of either creating the data or accessing the data that can help people in their assessment and planning. And on October 17th, it's a Thursday, I believe, and I think it's Meredith. Is it 11 o'clock Alaska time?
Yes.
Yes, 11 o'clock Alaska time, October 17. We'll have on Q Greenland, a Greenland focused GIS tool for community discussion and decision making by Elise Thurber, and she's with Colorado EDU. And then on November 14th, also a Thursday, Alaska Open Data Geoportal. So Leslie Jones from State of Alaska will present on Alaska Open Data Geoportal on November 14th. And that's the two we have so far. And if you or you know someone that have a tool in early in development, mid or late, whatever stage that you want to share and want people to know about, connect with me or Meredith, and we'll get you set up for a webinar presentation.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe add to that, there's some good dialogue today. So also, if there's just topics of interest within this community that you would like to maybe throw out there as an idea for a future meeting, it doesn't even have to be a presentation. We can center it around some discussions. We would welcome those ideas or thoughts as well. As Anna just pointed out in those two upcoming meetings, we're trying roughly to do about once a month a get together where there's a presentation or a discussion. So we have a few ideas in the works, but we're always looking for more. And if there's something that you think needs some attention, we'd like to use our platform to give it that attention.
Great. And I'm going to drop the emails for all of the co-leads for this team in the chat. So you can, if you have ideas, you can reach out to them, or further questions, you can reach out to them or me also, and I'll drop my email in there as well. And then if there are things that are relevant to this risk community, we have a little bit of time. If anyone has an event or an update that they would like to share, please feel free to do that now in the chat, and I can capture them in the notes, or unmute yourself and let us know if you know of something that's going on that's relevant to this group. Sandy?
Yeah, thanks for the talks today and the opportunity to just do some free-form sharing. So on behalf of the U.S. Arctic Observing Network, just wanted to update you on a deliverable that we've engaged with many of you on about an observational gaps assessment related to risk management and hazard mitigation in the Alaskan Arctic. And certainly many of the comments today have shaped and informed the work that we're already doing. And we're in a pretty active phase of that work right now in terms of working with subject matter experts to better expose gaps in our observational networks that are undermining our effectiveness at doing things like assessments and communities and that type of thing. And so we can, I'll drop a link in the chat to our webpage that's describing the project, and share my email. And so if you want to know more information about it, it's an IOPRIC deliverable under the monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction group. So that's the MOMP group. So we've maybe talked about it a little less inside the priority area 3 or 4 team, but we do consider ourselves to be very much thinking about and trying to support what you guys are doing. And so happy to connect with anybody who's interested about that.
Thanks, Sandy. Okay, all right. I think that's it. Again, want to thank everyone for attending today. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions, comments, things you want to follow up on, new ideas. And we appreciate that. Meredith, I'll turn it over to you to close it out, or I don't know if we're going to stay online for another 18 minutes in case people drop in late. But for those who like to leave, I guess we'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.